was, if I was chatting to 18, 19, year old me, and as you rightly point out, starting out, how did I start? I started out collecting glasses in my local rugby club during like function nights and things like that. And then the same person had organised the beer tent at Murrayfield in Edinburgh. So my first pints of poured were actually through there. And as you say, it's just, two massive services of just rattling out as many beers as possible. And the thing I loved was that when, at half time or at full time, you'd have the same crowd come specifically find you at the bar and be like, hey, I want you to pour my beer. And it all came down to, it wasn't, what I was doing. It wasn't me I was making it. Yes, somebody could have been making a gin and tonic or whatever it was, further down the bar. But people don't remember what you said, probably don't even remember what you drank, but they remember the way you made them feel. And to me, that is universal, regardless of where you are working or what type of outlet it is you're working in, and it's something that you can take to any type of place, talking about your own trade particularly, and it applies. It totally applies. It doesn't matter how, pun intended, deconstructed your drinks might be. Thank you. Thanks for that. But it's universal, and it's without geography as well. And yeah, I think you're right to point something like that out for sure. How about that glass? What's going on in there?
It's very interesting. I'm going to say there's much more on the American oak side. Well, I mean, American oak that didn't have sherry in it along the way. So I'd say this is an ex-bourbon cask. I'd say it's first fill. It's pretty heavy on the old vanillins. Or vanillin, or however you say it. I could be convinced that's a blended malt. It's got a couple of, and not necessarily, but it's a bit schizophrenic. There's a kind of a nice, rich, kind of fruity thing at the start, but there's like a puff of smoke behind it, which, I could believe there's a couple of things going on there in that kind of compass boxy premium blended malt kind of way. Again, I'd say around about somewhere in the mid 40s, but I may be lowballing that because it is Christmas, and the sherry with Christmas pudding may have altered my palate somewhat.
Yeah.
Again, it's delicious, being that kind of, it's such a different way to a sherry cask like the one we had before. Or, well, the two that we've had so far. It's like peaches and cream, vanillin, kind of really kind of nice. It's still rich, but in such a different way. And when we talk about whiskey, and people often talk about sweetness, there's so many types of sweetness. And the two obvious ones in whiskey are PX, Christmas cake, Sultana situation, or American oak, bourbon cask, vanilla. Creme brulee and Christmas cake are both sweet. They taste very different. And this is definitely on that kind of creme brulee side. It's got a nice richness to it. And the only thing that's swaying me somewhat is that it's got a lot of that custard thing that I associate with Japanese coffee malt.
Sorry to not prove you wrong, but it's a cheeky Nika from the barrel you've got there, which is one of my little favourite go-tos as well, particularly on a special occasion. And they tend to find a lot of those special occasions around Christmas as well. So I'm amazed that this has already lasted me about 6 months, and I haven't polished it off yet, because the last bottle I got for Christmas and it was gone by New Year. So I love this little drop. Japanese whiskey is something I'd love to go to Japan and actually see what it's like, because again, it's such an out there culture. But having never been, I'm definitely an outsider looking in. Am I right in thinking that you've travelled to Japan before yourself?
You know what? I haven't, and it's a fair assumption though. I mean, it's very close geographically to Australia. Most people will learn Japanese at school, and most of my friends will have been, and also have a real affinity to it. And I was never drawn, not for any particular reason, but even growing up, I kind of always wanted to visit Spain. God knows why that particular thing drew my attention as a 10-year-old in Queensland. But but a lot of my friends have a real affinity with it, and I never have, and it was never much of a desire until the last few years, and now it's really creeping up the list. Not just because of whiskey, but because of I guess more and more friends who have visited and love it. But also just because I guess as you get older, the need for familiarity, for me anyway, becomes a little bit less. you've experienced what you've experienced, and you kind of know it, and that's fine. But if to go on holiday somewhere like Japan, because it is, the culture is so different, and I guess we are now more familiar with it in a way because of the Japanese bartending impact on the industry globally, and as well as the whiskey industry. But when I see kind of who's been mentioned on the show before, Junior Honma, who has the Bow Bar in I'm gonna say Sapporo, but I might be wrong. Anyway, he's got a bar called the Bow Bar, named for the Bow Bar in Edinburgh. And he's got some amazing old vintages of a lot of Scotch, a lot of Armagnac as well, and a kind of vaguely obsessive but very passionate kind of collection and a method of serving it. And I see that and go, these are my people. I get this, So once this is all over and traveling becomes easier again, it's so far up the list because it's something that more and more as I get older, I just want to be able to have experienced it, and I mean, different cultures, but Japan in particular.
Yeah, absolutely. No, and again, it's rare for me, having come from Scotland and then tasted what the distillers there have bottled, perhaps having visited a part of the country nearby it. But the thing I love about that in particular is that I tasted it and it makes me want to go to Japan even more. Talking about the capturing the essence of what that is in a bottle. I don't know what that's capturing, but it's kicking off all sorts of ideas in both my mouth and my brain at the same time. So it's a great bit. Yeah.
I think it's just that joy of just putting blending as being key. And when the Japanese industry was kind of founded between the wars, when Masataka Taketsuru came across to Japan from Japan and he worked at 5 distilleries, and I always forget all of them, but he worked at Longmorn and Bramore and I think Glenfarclas and a couple others. But at the time he learned how to make whiskey, but what was being produced, what was actually being bottled, even in Scotland, was almost entirely blends. So blends were king. So when he went back to set up what would become Nika, he made Yuichi and he made Miyagikyo, one in the style of a coastal distillery, not necessarily heavily peated, but a coastal distillery like the Pulteney you were talking about, and one in the style of more of a Highland kind of inland distillery, for want of a better word, with the idea of blending, with the idea of bringing styles together, and then grain whiskey would have to follow because that's how you make a blend. And the Japanese still now, in their Japanese whiskey blends, will import a lot of Scottish whiskey to bulk it out. A lot of it for Nika comes through Ben Nevis because they own that distillery. But for the Japanese industry, making a whiskey is blending it.
Yeah.
That's what makes it the Japanese whiskey. The art of blending and the art of putting it together to create the taste, the profile on the product happened in Japan. Therefore, they're happy to slap the word Japanese on it, which I think that's absolutely fine because there's transparency there. For us in Scotland, it has to be distilled, aged, and bottled in Scotland. For the Japanese, no, if it's blended here, it's ours. I'm like, cool, fair enough. The grain's coming from all over the world anyway. Everything, the casks are coming from all over the world. There's enough international elements there. Why not use the best that you can? And just championing that blend thing, and you see it there with that kind of me thinking that there was some, as I said, a bit schizophrenic, that dram. It's because the complexity can be brought from the different distilleries that are at play there. So the peated thing was obviously from Miyagikyo, though the kind of smoke I was spotting. The richness from Yuichi, but then the grain, the kind of coffee stilled malt in there, which gives you that vanilla thing. And that's why you get that kind of complexity on the palate. And I think it's really admirable that even though the Scotch whisky industry has boomed through single malt, especially its popularity and notoriety, where the Japanese have kind of stuck to their guns and gone, no, blending's the thing. That's what we do.
Yeah. And
you taste that and you go, yeah, cool, keep doing it.
Yeah, absolutely. And to me, it's again almost have been at the cold face of that sort of consumer onslaught that you get around, particularly this time of year, about what people are drinking and what it looks like. It's to me something like that, as you say, which blends. Yeah, they're still huge. We know volume wise that Scotch blends are by far the biggest in the world, but in I suppose industry circles, they're almost a secondary conversation after your special releases and your one-off casks in particular. And I think there's a lot to be said to say, cool, I love innovation and it's brilliant, but don't forget these blends are your benchmark, and that benchmark is still being raised by these guys in Japan without question for me. It's really interesting to see that you know, that's the avenue that they've taken, and that's the thing they're really stepping up with.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, you know, the expertise of blending. If you put me in any warehouse in Scotland and said you've got 12 months in there, bottle a single cask, pretty sure I'd find something decent to bottle. I'd manage it just about. If you said go in there and make a blend using 10,000 casks, no chance on this green earth that I would ever come up with anything decent. You know, I mean, the skill in blending is phenomenal. And that's blending to make a blend, or blending to make a blended malt, or simply blending something like the standard 10-year-old or 12-year-old release, because it will be blended to an extent. And you need to monitor casks to create a consistency, to do so many things. And it's an act of forecasting and foresight 10, 12 years in advance. It's cask management, it's consistency, it's palate, and it's stock management on a scale that I really need to go for a lie down if I think about it for too long. You know, it's phenomenal.
Yeah, 100%. It's good. And I suppose, you know, thinking about that, you know, this is part of a little selection box, and, you know, this is just a nice little selection box for me. But, you know, tying that back into the desert island drams, is what else would you have in there? You know,
well,
this time.
Funny. I mean, yeah, this time of year, you know, the Glendronach already gets that sherry bomb out of the way, which for anything I think I would need, because that's kind of my wheelhouse, but for Christmas, definitely. Start to look at peat, you kind of look at things like Lagavulin DE is tempting. And then kind of you swing across and you think, well, you do think about Japanese, Nika from the Barrel, such a staple, but some of like the old Nika Black pure malt, which had some smoke to it, but still had that refinement of Japanese whiskey, becomes very tempting. And then for me, you know, if I didn't go kind of balls to the wall with the Glendronach and go for like a 18-year-old single cask, you know, bottled in 2010 or something ridiculous, you do need to get, I think you need something quite bougie in there. You know, if you're on a desert island for a long time, I think you need an absolute baller. Yeah, I think you need a 1964 Bowmore or a 1982 Port Ellen or something like that. I think you really need to go like, I mean, there's no budget here, and there's no genuine. I mean, this is all hypothetical. Get something, get in there, and you know, it would, again, you open yourself up to such a variety of things. But for me, I think it would be in it would probably be a Bowmore. And the 60s Bowmore in general is kind of spoken about as such a time of kind of the hero years, I guess, for Bowmore, really tropical spirit coming through. There's been some great releases. But as you say, I've had some great times on Isla. And, you know, I really enjoy the place. But some of my favorite memories of those are at Bowmore Distillery in particular. From my stag do, and not from anything wistful and casting eyes over, you know, sullen locks while drinking drams, but more just because of enjoyment and fun and silliness and at times abject stupidity, let's be honest. But, you know, if you're on a desert island having a dram and it's one of three that you can have for all, it should at least bring back some memories, I think. So I think, you know, this week's answer anyway would see me with some sort of 1960s Bowmore to add to that, I think.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, I love that aspect. My favorite Bowmore memory was when, God, I was 18, turning 19 years old. So I had a bit of time at university and made pals with a wee guy from Isla. He was actually from Port Ellen, and his family still lived over there. So at the end of first year, we're all still in Glasgow at the time, Glasgow University. He said, why don't you come over for the open air? Myself and a couple of other pals. So we did, and of course we all recently passed our driving tests. So we all, you know, we're all like 6 foot guys as well. So we all bundled in at the back of our mate's Fiat Punto, I think it was. Made the drive around the Tarbert, got the ferry over, and pitched up. You know, not really knowing what to expect whatsoever. And I reckon at the time, you know, I'd probably started drinking whiskey, but definitely mixed, you know, always mixed, probably with cola, you know, certainly would have been with like ginger ale as well if it was available in one of the wee Isla pubs there. But I remember the following day, waking up, a wee bit of a hang, it was cool, you know, but it was, we first, you know, got to have a proper chat around the breakfast table with wee Alan's family. And his dad says, oh, did you enjoy your drink last night? I was like, yeah, it was brilliant, you know, it was a fun wee pub, you know, got a chat to a few of the locals, didn't cause too much upset, didn't piss in anyone's garden, that kind of, you know, tomfoolery. So we made a decent account of ourselves, given it was just the arrival night. course, he then, shortly after breakfast, slaps down 3 little vials of clear liquid in front of us and says, "Give that a wee try." All right, it seems interesting. Not being afraid of vodka at that time, certainly, but having no clue about the production of how whiskey was made. So, of course, tried it, and face more or less turned itself inside out. His dad's in the background chuckling away, and he's like, "What do you think that is?" I was like, it tastes like someone has made an absolute arse of your vodka, or they put something terrible in it. He's like, 18 years from now, you'll not be saying that. He was actually a manager in the Bowmore distillery. Of course, we then went by it, got to see it, the location, where the casks were and everything like that. But the beauty of it was that at that age, I didn't have the appreciation, or probably just not the fortitude of palate, to be perfectly honest, to really enjoy something like that. And there's a big element of palates developing and how that can affect your what it is you enjoy. Is there anything, and this leads me to this question, which is there anything you think you haven't tasted but you want to taste, whether it be in a dram or in another spirit or something like that, that you want to see more of, or you want to try more of in the future?
As in like a certain flavor profile, or like a new style kind of thing? I mean,
it could be either.
Yeah, I mean, I think I think especially in Scotch whiskey, we're a bit hamstrung by some of the regulations at times, and things have opened up a lot recently. I tried a sample of the first tequila cask from an Islay distillery actually, just a week or two ago. I think that kind of thing is opening up nicely, and I think letting those influences come into whiskey without diluting it too much, but being a bit more experimental. I definitely think that's quite important. But I think what I'm really enjoying is seeing the way New World whiskey is developing, especially the Archieros where I used to work, having kind of a different malt and a multi malt format, I guess. So they were taking a brewer's attitude to the fermentation. So we were fermenting and then distilling mash bills of 6 different types of malted barley. So like Pilsner malt, chocolate malt, pale malt, exactly like you would to make a beer. You always would balance a malt bill. I think that's quite cool. And just seeing, even, I don't think we should relax all the rules and just go nuts and then kind of almost make it too easy. But within these rules, pushing boundaries, and Glenmorangie did it with the Signet. The Signet, it has some chocolate malt in it. You can see the influence on the final product, absolutely. But taking it a step further, I think Scotland's always been a bit reticent for 2 reasons. Because what works and sells, and that's great. And also because there's the constant kind of to and fro with the SWA and figuring things out. But I think acknowledging that, chocolate malt's an interesting one because it seems like it's cheating. If you make your whiskey taste like chocolate, it's going to be fucking delicious. And that's cheating. It doesn't count. I think that's the thing is like, well, yeah, exactly. Absolutely.
Proves your chocolate if you have chocolate in your malt already, surely, right?
So I think just getting past that a little bit and being like, what, if we can insert these flavors genuinely, naturally, nothing's natural. It's whiskey. None of that happens naturally. But we're still with the beating heart of what whiskey should be, but actually be able to, manipulate a bit further and using, different combinations of cask and grain and distillation and maturation and fermentation, and just maybe acknowledging a bit like Mark Rayner's doing in Waterford, acknowledging terroir of grain. But that there's so many other steps in whiskey production, and 95% of our chat is about cask.
Yeah.
And what cask it is, and really, there's so many other things where we could maybe be influencing it. And I think the future of of innovation will definitely come to that. And you will see more different styles. Ardnamurchan, their first release was half peated, half unpeated. Still single malt, still all from the Ardnamurchan distillery, but split by 2 different styles. And I think we see more and more of that kind of splicing together of different flavors to create, balance and poise and have some structure in single malt whiskey, because single malt whiskey essentially at the minute is very, very linear. It's very kind of tied up in distillery character from the spirit, but also then distillery style. So, some distillery will be predominantly aged in sherry casks or exclusively aged in bourbon casks, or whatever. So that not just the spirit itself, but the style of the releases. Go have a style guide, and that's fine. But there can be so much more nuanced parts to take within that, and it's good to see the likes of Ardnamurk in Scotland as a new distillery, and also the New World distillers like those in Australia and further abroad, still doing things in Scotland's image, but just seeing where the soft bits are and the boundaries, and seeing if they can push it a wee bit. Now that's what I would like to see brought home to the Scottish market as well.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's very easy to be caught up in what's worked in the past, but being able to sort of think about, well, what do we need for the future? You know, that's a really interesting question for every producer of any spirit. But I think particularly something as ancient and as well renowned as Scotch whisky itself. It's you know, the SWA is definitely been accused of being a bit old-fashioned at times, and you know, there was a lot of controversy this year, particularly around Mr. Murray's Whiskey Bible and how old-fashioned the ideas were around that. And I think there's a real image thing here that the industry has to be aware of, that isn't right for the future going forward, regardless of the history that's come before it as well. But you know, there's a big aspect of that as well, which is, you know, how are people affected by the industry, you know, and I like to think we're moving into a society where the drinks industry is one step ahead of other industries in the aspect of, you know, looking after yourself and looking after others around you as well, and the best ways to do that, you know, and that sort of, I guess it's a real balance between being grateful for what you have and thinking about what you want to change for the future, you know. And it's immensely important in a day and age where people are thinking about their mental health, and particularly in an industry that's, you know, renowned for having trouble with, you know, working late nights, alcoholism, of course, that can lead on to other things too in the industry, and it can affect people in a lot of different ways. And I think, you know, now is a real opportunity for everyone in the industry to make that an open conversation, and it's certainly becoming more of an open conversation. It'll be interesting to see how that baton's picked up next year as well, when COVID isn't the number one story, and actually what we're doing as an industry to bounce back, you know, next year is, you know, well, what is it that's going to make the hospitality industry so appealing? Why would people want to get back into it again when it certainly seems through a lot of restrictions through government that, you know, they're trying to discourage people from being in the industry, which I think is a real difficult balance, isn't it? You know, and I guess, you know, you've got a lot more on the ground links with the on trade. You know, how are you seeing the industry and people within the industry dealing with the challenges that they've been thrown at them at the moment, and how they're dealing with that, you know, for themselves and their own personal well-being?
I mean, it's such an interesting time, obviously, for so many reasons. You know, it's unprecedented in a sense. You know, the world has seen pandemics before. We've had, you know, where there was one 100 years ago, but we didn't have what we have now, which is the interconnectivity of things like this. And so we can talk to our friends and family across the world and next door and everything in between really easily. So that, you know, so that it's easier in ways, and we have Netflix, you know, we have things like that. But we also have more access to kind of so many things that can be negatively impactful as well. So it's a lot easier to get caught up in your own head and your own anxiety and things. So everything comes with a good and a bad, you know, as things change. But it's interesting in the industry because obviously it's shit, and obviously, you know, a lot of people, the majority of people in the industry thrive on it, you know. And while there are ups and downs, there are negatives, and it can have certainly take its toll on certain members of the industry. And I obviously would always encourage people to watch out for that and keep an eye on their mates and you know, put an arm around it and ask if people are okay whenever it seems like it's necessary. And on the other side, always ask for help when it's needed. But that kind of that need for the high paced, the adrenaline, the service, the experience of it is obviously missing for a lot of people. And you'll know as I do that, you know, that never leaves you. You know, I'm 2 years out of full-time service and I still miss it. You know, it's something that once you know it, you know, you do kind of love. But on the other side of that, a lot of people are spending a lot of time at home. They have they are, mostly, they obviously not everyone, but those who have been furloughed or, have, some financial support can spend a lot of time not working, which is none of us are really used to in the industry, especially on service, but still being financially fine, having time for yourselves, time for your partner, time to cook at home, time to go to bed at a normal time, time to do so many things. And, I think while it's challenging for all, and while there'll be negative repercussions for a long time to come, this, especially on the mental health front, especially on so many kind of aspects of that side, a lot of people will come out of this with kind of refreshed expectations of what they want out of life. And doing 65 hours a week isn't going to be one of them.
Yeah.
Not seeing your partner isn't going to be one of them. Not seeing your mates outside of like 3 a.m. bars doing shots of bourbon rapidly isn't going to be one of them. So I think it's showing people, that there is a life outside of it, and balance is still possible. And while you can't wait to get behind the bar, you can't wait to get by on the pass and do that kind of thing and go back to what you love doing, realizing that it doesn't have to be the be all and end all. And that's kind of what's been sold to hospitality for years. It's the be all and end all. And it creates a fraternity, the likes of which you won't experience outside of it. If you work busy services, if you work behind a pass, if you work those hours dealing with those arsehole customers, those kind of things, it's brothers in arms stuff, it's friends for life. But it doesn't need to be that. And I think that's what people are kind of realizing more and more, that out of this, when we go back to it, 45-hour week is fine. Pushing yourself to 60 to prove you can doesn't achieve anything.
Yeah.
It's that kind of thing. So I hope that while there'll be hugely negative impacts on people's mental health at the minute, and there will be anxieties and there will be, homesickness, because a lot of people are stuck in places that they didn't necessarily intend to be for as long as they have been, and all that sort of thing. At the other side of this, just remember what it was like to have dinner with your wife or your partner every night. Just remember what it was like to not be to know what your flat looked like. Remember what it was like to have a house plant you could actually water. Remember what it was like to not be like searching for that last clean shirt because you had time to do your washing stuff, and just keep it going. And when your employer says, "Can you do that 6th or 7th day?" just say no, because you know what's going to happen. Nothing. We're not saving lives. Nothing's going to burn down. And I think employees' guilt, which is rife in all parts of society, is so strong in hospitality in particular, that I think now that we should all realize that you don't need it to be.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And I suppose it's kind of a bit of a twist on an old phrase, which is charity starts at home, but hospitality should as well, and you want to make sure people are happy at home so they can actually be as hospitable as possible when they actually go into those roles as well. And it's not, as you say, it's not that, for want of a terrible phrase, a hard man competition to see who can go the hardest and longest, because that's not got us anywhere. And it's not a long-term goal. And I think that's what pulls a lot of people out from hospitality, from making it a career. And unless you step off the bar into a role like something like what you're doing, or what I've done certainly, or brand ambassadorship, it's definitely always going to be that kind of bit part industry that props up other industries in the country. But I guess that makes it such an important aspect of society as well. But it'd be interesting to see what the lie of the land is. If we walk up into 2021 and there's decimation of the hospitality industry, it really does lay down the foundations to change it for the better, for the long term, and for people's careers as well. And that's something to look forward to, I'd say.
Yeah, I think importantly, just accept that that we all have limitations and admit them. I was really fortunate, especially in the first half of my 20s, that I could work 18 hours on my feet, 65 hours a week, and still be hospitable and fine. It kind of just washed over me, and that was because that's the personality that I am, and that probably just speaks to a lack of higher brain function, really, to be honest. But I literally could do it. But I would always say to staff, doesn't mean you have to. Doesn't achieve anything by doing it. I'm not better anyway for doing it. It just means there's a quirk of my personality that can. But I can barely add up. So everyone's got their thing. So because someone else can do it and you can't, whether it be lifting a heavy keg, and I'm sure we've all had that moment where you've realized your back's been affected by doing that when you shouldn't. Whether it's lifting a keg or doing an extra 5 hours or an extra day when you shouldn't, just ask for help. Don't try that section of 15 tables on your own if it's not doable, or if it's stressing you out, or if it's just keeping you up at night, just ask for help. And honestly, if someone doesn't give it to you, you're working in the wrong place. And they might tell you, well, that's part of the job. It's actually not. There are plenty of hospitality employers out there. And hopefully they're the ones that are surviving this because they are being supported and they have loyal customers and stuff because they do the right things. But, just stay within whatever your limits are. It doesn't matter what they are, but just stay within them and don't push yourself because, as I say, no one's going to die.
Yeah.
Right. So I'm going to dig into this a little bit. This is number one. One of the backward sessions. So I guess I'm really enjoying this. Actually, it's nice to cover a lot of these things because there's a lot of important topics that kind of don't get covered a lot of the time because you're looking at, a lot of content is focused and kind of education focused and knowledge focused. So it's nice to just have a chat and kind of go through things. So what I've noticed this, I mean, this is Christmas. It's a time to be grateful, isn't it? I mean, it's a time to kind of reflect on what you've got. And this year more than ever, to be here at the end of it is something to be grateful for. I don't just mean that in a really morbid way, but just to be kind of, happy and surviving and kind of got through what has been a really shit year. It's pat on the back stuff for everyone because it's been such challenging times. But, from being in the industry, we've just talked about some of the negative stuff and, you can get caught up in all sorts of things and the way that it can negatively affect you. What makes you kind of grateful for being in and around this world that we live in?
Oh, what makes me grateful? Shirt in my back. It's real basics, isn't it? Let's be honest. Having a dram is a luxury, and if you've got any form of luxury in your life, then you're probably doing okay. And it's hard not to get a bit sentimental and cheesy about it. But if you've ever been through a hard time where you barely had 2 pennies in your pocket to rub together, and you made your way out of it, then you're doing all right. If you lost your job but you still kept putting food on the table, you're doing all right. Got a roof over your head, you're doing all right. And if you've got something to look forward to, you're doing great. And that's, I think, having that kind of sort of grounding about, the things you're thankful for is certainly puts a lot of the bigger things into perspective, certainly for me. And I know I wouldn't have been able to have done it without, having gone through some tough times, whether it's in the industry or whether it's, my personal life as well. And of course, the two, they intertwine so much and have done. And I met my now wife working in hospitality, Cameron House in Loch Lomond, and very recently we had a daughter. So yeah, that's completely changed my aspect of what's really important to me going forward as well. And funny, just talking about having that balance between work and life, without question, I want to keep working. I want to keep being ambitious. I want to keep going out there and doing what I love, which is talking about this stuff. But at the same time, I want to do it as quick as I can to the best of my ability so I can come home and spend time with my daughter. Because it's one of those strange, suppose, life-altering experiences, is having this entire little being completely reliant on you. And it's really affected me as an individual, and it's only been a short time as well. So what am I thankful for? All of those things. I'm thankful for family. I'm thankful for friends. I'm thankful for the tough times as much as I am for the good times. And I'm really looking forward to seeing how this industry develops. And I really hope that those who are able to stick with it, who are able to continue pushing themselves and drive the drinks industry, have the type of future where they can be successful. And yeah, it's a lot of things to be grateful for, but I guess that's where I'm at with it. Thanks for this wee dram you sent through the post in particular. I mean, that's amazing to be able to connect like this via Zoom, and as you say, quite rightly, that's now a verb, and that's something for us to be grateful for. So yeah,
we've always been aware of Zoomers, but the context has changed.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's cool. I'm missing the entree day. I'm missing the word of mouth aspect. I'm missing the chat. But I know that the operators and the people working within that side of the industry, the ones that are really good, they're going to weather this. Even if they have to take time out from it and then come back to it, the ones that love it will be the ones that will stick with it and kick it on in the future. So that's something definitely to be grateful for.
Absolutely. It's I guess as I say, as you see, we're so lucky to have so many creative, inspiring, adaptable, especially just now, people in this industry that, as tough as it's been, you and I have been around it for a long time and know a lot of people who are so passionate about it. It's nice to have that kind of absolute assuredness that it will be here at the other end of it. It will survive, and it will only continue to get better because we know the people who drive it and we know how good they are.
Absolutely. So what do you reckon's going on in this glass? Because I've got to let you in on a secret. This is one of my desert island drams. I had to share with you.
Well, this is a nice way, and we'll need to wrap it up soon, because I think you and I have been talking for probably longer than even I realised. But
yeah,
what happens when old friends get together? And this is obviously Christmas Day, and hopefully you've just put this on in the background and let our dulcet tones wash over you, not paid close attention to the whole thing. But I mean, I would say this is from our cousins across the Atlantic. I'd say it's between 15 and 20 odd years old, if I had to guess. Possibly a bit older, but it's got a bit of punch ABV to it. I would. It's got, being an older bourbon, it's got such a whack of kind of wood spice that might be kind of a little bit distorting my ABV sense, but I think maybe actually only high 40s now that I think of it. I could be wrong. And I would say this is from Sazerac, if I had to guess, because it doesn't have the kind of very dirty side that Heaven Hill Surrey does.
Yeah.
Anyway, I mean, literally of things from the ground, not some sort of kind of fetish or anything.
Good save.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well rescued. But yeah, I'm gonna have a kind of a shot in the dark. This is an old Pappy.
No, but you're really close. I mean, it's essentially the same mash bill as a Pappy, a little bit younger. It's a William LaRue Weller. This particular bottling, gosh, it's 64.1% ABV by volume, which is probably one of the lower ones. It does go a little bit higher. As we know, the ABV of bourbon tends to go up the way due to the climate over time. So I'm pretty sure this one was 15 years old. It's uncut, it's unfiltered. But this is, this one changes so much. They do an antique collection release every year from the Buffalo Trace Distillery. This, when it becomes a little bit older, you can also get bottled up as Pappy. Of course, they age it in different parts of the warehouse as well, because they want to pull out different aspects of the barrel that they put in, which is all new American oak. All done to a number 4 char there as well. But I received that on my wedding day, so it has an extra sentimental value for me as well. And
nice.
If I was drifting somewhere out in the ocean on a little desert island, I'd certainly have that as one of my favourite memories to go to in the glass as well. So it's a beast.
It's really punchy, but honestly, I wouldn't have picked that as alcohol punch. I wouldn't have picked it at 64. It's got it's full, it's big, but it's not. It doesn't have too much. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's warming. You know about it, but it's not. By no means. Things at 64% tend to be. The resulting situation can be a dry cough and loss of sense of taste and smell. It's kind of nothing you want just now. So. That is very nice. Thank you so much for that, man. It's a very special bottling for you to send up a dram of, so I really appreciate that.
Yeah, all good. My pleasure. And it's been really good to chat, and actually really nice to see how much input you've having to these conversations as well now, Simon, and actually getting to get inside the space in between your ears a little bit. It's been great.
plenty of space, right enough. So, Matt, well, I mean, let's wrap up. Have you got a last Christmas message for the viewers, Deeks?
I don't know, Brora. Come on. You got any words of advice? Come here. On you come. Right. Remember, whiskey is for Christmas, but a dog's for life. That's it for me.
Amazing. Well, I mean, to you, the new E1, your wife and Brora, very Merry Christmas to you, mate, and a good New Year's when it comes. And thanks for all the watching. And for me, you know, we talk about gratitude this time of year. The reception to this vlog, to Whiskey Cynicism, has been exceptionally humbling over the last 8 or 9 months, however long I've been doing it for. And to have had now 20 of some of the finest kind of people in the industry on here to talk about the Desert Island Drams, as well as some heroes and mentors of mine, has been exceptionally humbling as well. So for those of you who have watched, read, clicked links, liked, shared, storied, tweeted, all of the weird things we do now in our lives, thank you so much for spending this kind of weird time keeping an eye on not only the world of whiskey, but the world of cynicism. So thank you so much. Deeks, all the best to you, mate. Slanjavar, and take care out there, folks. Stay safe.
Merry Christmas, everybody. That's my new. Cheers.